Let's go ahead and finish up that script we made a couple of videos ago. You know this one right here where we introduced the tree element in the UI system? But in this video, we're going to take it another step further, teach some more stuff about the UI, but also introduce a lot of things, including a color picker, a slider, and a few different things as well. Let's hop into it. We're going to be first starting off with the logo I have at the top and that little image we have. We're going to use actually a text box. And using that, we're going to put in HTML. It's going to display the picture we have in the code as base64. Before we actually start doing this, it may be a good idea if you want to follow along, make your own base64. I have a link down in the description. It's the one that I use commonly. It's a nice website that'll convert any PNG to base64. All you have to do is use the code you get from that and put it into your file. So if I come up here to the very top of our file, I'm going to come down here and add in do local logo B64. Set that equal to it. I'm just going to paste in the base64 data I have for that. And it needs to be a string, but it needs to be a multi-line string, just so that any extra weird syntax is not ignored. So we have all that. It's going to be very long. It's going to add a few bytes to your file. Make sure that it is small. It could, because the size of the file that you turn into base64 is the size it's going to be in HTML. So we can't size this down later. So before we actually get started, make sure before it's even base64 that you have set the size however big you want. I would say 100 pixels is usually a pretty good size for the image. Maybe a little bigger depending on whatever you're doing, but 100 pixels is probably a good size, at least like width-wise. Okay, now that we have that, we can go and get started here. We need to add in a text edit element. We can go ahead and add in an ID, set that equal to logo. And here we're going to not actually add text, we're going to add in HTML. So that means any HTML that you put in here technically is going to work no matter what. So we can go ahead and do center to make sure that it's centered in this text edit box. Also, we're going to make our image link to a website whenever they click on it. So we're going to make sure this has a for a link with the href equal to the URL you want us to take it to. I'm going to go ahead and put in my website URL. So I'm going to get that from over here. Now that we have that on here, we can now add in the image and set the source to the base64 logo. So since we're in a string right now, we're going to have to concatenate. So we're going to put a quotation mark there for inside the concatenation, go outside of the string, concatenate the logo base64 onto here, and then concatenate the ending of the string, which is just going to be an end to the quotation mark and then an end bracket for that. Set a few more settings so that the user can't interact with it. We're going to set a read only, and we're going to set this to a boolean of true so that the user will not be able to edit this. We're going to set the frame style to 0 to make sure that it has no frame. We're also going to add an event. This will be something that's pretty common as you get using this more and more. You do have to add on events to certain UI elements. They're not made with those events. One of the things you have to have is anchor click. That is because the A that we put into the HTML over here, this is called an anchor. So it's just going to check, hey, did the anchor click happen? And then do something when they click that link. And then we're also going to make sure that the weight for this is 0. And then that is it for now. That's it for now. Let's go and actually take a look at how this looks. And take a look at that. We can see, okay, that is my little logo. I'm just using the logo for the new macro creator. If you're curious what that is, go and check out everything I have for that down in the description. It's pretty cool. And now if you click this, it's going to open up my browser. Or is it? It's not going to do that because you need to actually still grab that event. We have the event on here. It is a link to a website and it does look like you can click on it, but right now it does not go anywhere because we have to capture that event and then send it off somewhere. In this way, we're going to set it up a little bit differently. I would recommend doing this so that you don't have to worry about writing the exact same code over and over again with repeated URLs everywhere. We're going to create a new function called link click. We're going to make it way up here right after the base64. So we're going to make a new local function, link click, and we're going to capture the event. Typing in just EV in there is all you really need. As long as you put something in there, it's going to capture it with whatever variable you put in there. Now we're going to make sure that we actually access the BMD library. This is something that is completely separate from the Resolve API and the Fusion API. This is a completely new API that is basically just functions that you're able to access, one of which is to crash Resolve if you ever wanted to do that for whatever reason. But you can also open a link. So if we do bmd.openurl and then put in ev.url, that is going to actually activate the link. So the event that it's capturing is just the anchor object, like the anchor element in the HTML. And then we're just going to need to look, okay, what is the URL on that anchor? And then open the link to that URL. That's all that we're doing here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the name of our function here, copy it exactly how it is. Come on down here, wherever we really want to go with it, but we'll put it right over here after adding the video clips. We're going to, once again, create this structure to capture an event. So we're going to do win.on.logo, because that's the ID of our text edit field. And then we need to do on anchor. This is just the name of the event that we have enabled on there. And we're going to set that equal to the function name without the call. If we do the call in here, it's going to try to activate the link as soon as it's loaded into the document or as soon as it's loaded into the script. We don't want that to happen. We want it to not try to activate the function right on load. We want it to only activate when the anchor is clicked. And this is a good way to set up linking your events to functions if you'd rather do it this way. When we click this, it's going to launch my website over here in my browser. It's going to do the default browser on the computer, just like this. Now we're going to add something else to our UI. And we're going to add in a UI label. We've already looked at these. This is nothing new for us. We're going to give it text, but I do want to introduce you to something a little bit new. So instead of just typing in regular text in here, we're going to, on Windows at least, we're going to open up our emoji keyboard with Windows and period. And we're going to choose one of our emojis. Let's just choose the nerd emoji. And we're going to do the advanced examples. And we can go and do Windows period again and go and put on our confetti alignment. We want to set that to an align center equals to true. That just makes sure that our text is horizontally and vertically aligned. And then we can go ahead and set the weight equal to 0. Set a style sheet for this. But if you just put in anything like setting the color to like red, for example, we're going to see in the UI, this text is now going to have the color of red. We're going to see our text has color of red. You can put anything in there that you can do regularly in CSS. And this is with the Qt CSS library. So go ahead and look that up if you need to get any more information about that. So we actually want to set this equal to a variable, and we'll just call this title underscore CSS, just so that it's really easy for us to find. We're going to copy this, and we're going to make this a variable up here right above this with the rest of our variables. We're going to make sure that it's assigned to this, give it the multi-line string, and then just press enter, and it will create this gap right here. I'm just going to copy in some CSS I have over here in my other script, just so it's a little easier, and let's just talk about what this is. So this is part of the Qt library. Everything that you put in here needs to be the name or like classification of whatever that is. So make sure that you've assigned it to the Q label, and then we can put in our CSS in here. You can also put in just CSS without assigning it to this, and that will work just the same, but this is good to work with the Q library how it should be. So we can set our color, we can set it to RGB, we can set it to hexadecimal, we can set it to the words. It all will work. You have a little bit more control with the hexadecimal, but this is also fine. We can also set our font size, which we'll just set to 30 pixels, and then also a font weight, which we'll just set to bold. We seem to be missing something. It does not seem to be actually center aligned. That is because I misspelled alignment. We're going to see it is nicely centered. It looks really good. In our button, we're going to actually go ahead and add in some new CSS for this. We're going to go ahead and first add in a style sheet, set that equal to a button CSS. Pretty easy. We're going to copy this and create our CSS for this as well. And this is going to be where it gets a little more interesting for the CSS here. So let's go ahead and make our multi-line string. We have just the regular Q push button, and we can put in all of our stuff into here, set the border stuff, get rid of a border, set it to whatever we want. You can set the font and all the other stuff. But you can also come into here and set the hover, what's going to happen when you hover over it, and also what happens whenever you press it. So you can do full custom CSS interactions on this. Something to note, you don't have control over the cursor. That is something separate, only really for web viewers. We can see right here when you hover over it, and if we click on one of these options, we can then jump to that. We can see it goes black when we click it. That's just how we set it. Now let's come in here and do something after the button. Let's add in more stuff to our UI. We're going to go and start off by adding a UI spin box. This is a new concept for us. And it's going to just have an ID of test nums. Then we're going to add a prefix to the spin box. So a spin box is essentially a text box that you can only accept numbers. It only can do a limited amount of numbers. You can put in a prefix and a suffix in there to really help identify what it is without having a bunch of labels on it. So what we can do is make a prefix equal to just item and add a space because it doesn't add much margin around it, much padding around it. And we can go and do a suffix, set that equal to of, and we're going to add another space, and we're going to actually concatenate something onto here. On this, we're actually going to get the full number of all the video items. So we're going to get video clips, copy that, and what we're going to do is we're going to put the video clips table right here, but also then do a pound sign in front of it, and this is going to get the number of video clips. And we're actually going to subtract it by 1 because that's just how the table is laid out, and we'll explain that here in a little bit. But if we now take the next step and add in a value, we can add a value that is just equal to the number of video clips, but then divided by 2. So the value, which is just whatever the default number is that it's going to be equal to half of the amount of video clips on our timeline. And then we want the maximum to be equal to the number of video clips, once again, we're going to do -1. Because that's just, once again, how it's laid out in the table. And we're going to do minimum is going to be equal to 0. It's not going to be read-only. We're going to make that equal to false. And it is going to have wrapping, which is meaning that it's going to, once it gets to the last number, it's going to wrap back around to the first number. So if it starts at 0 and ends at 10, it's going to, whenever it would go over to 11, it's going to just go back over to 0. So then we're going to turn that true, and we're also going to give this a weight of 0, so it does not take up any extra space. Okay, so we can see we have 10 items in this list. Then we have item 5 of 9, and if we go all the way to the start by wrapping from 9 back to 0, we can see it starts on 0 and ends on 9. So we know that we have 10 things in our first track here. Let's add some more stuff to our UI to make our UI even cooler. So we're going to add an H group onto this. We can see we already have a V group that is a vertical group. An H group, as you may be able to guess, is a horizontal group. We're going to go and add it just like this. We give it our open space there, and we're going to add it to have a weight of 0, because now think of this like this. I'm going to actually put in a graphic right here. So all these elements are in this main V group, and they take up a horizontal space on the V group. And the weight is going to set how much of that vertical space it is taking up. So then when you have the H group that is setting a horizontal bar with multiple elements to be stacked, then we're going to have it need to also have its own weight, just like these individual items have their own weights. The weight inside of the group is dependent just within the group itself. So if one has a bigger weight than the other one, then it's going to take up more horizontal space than vertical space. That's where it can be a little confusing, but also is where you can do super master UI techniques with this simple UI system. So in here, we're going to add a label just so we can identify what this control is for. And we're going to give it just text of color influence and give it a weight of 0. So we don't want this to take up any extra space. And then to add on to this, we're going to add on a slider. That's right. Sliders don't have their own labels, at least not that I have found. So we can add on a slider, give it the ID, and we're going to make this tree colors, and we're going to give it a value of 100, so it's going to be set to the top number. Give it a minimum value of 0, set the weight to 1, so it takes up most of the space, and give it the event for when the slider is moved, so slider moved. And we can set that once again equal to true. So now this is going to just add on a label. It's going to look very similar to how it looks on macros. Look at it right here. It's just on the left side with our slider right in here. It doesn't give us a value. You could totally add on a box to the right of it to give it a value. We can maybe go and do that really quick. It's going to be really simple. We can just do UI line edit, give it an ID of influence, and then we're not going to give it a text, and we'll just give it a weight of 0. So it only takes up as much space as it needs to. Okay, and now we're going to add on the event capture for the slider moved while we're in here. We'll also be using this for other things later on, but we're going to set this up first. Come on down here to after our link is clicked, and we'll add another function with the when.on. This one's going to be tree color dot slider moved. Once again, that's the event we added on there. And what we want to do is just get the value and put it equal to whatever that text is. So let's go and get the value at first, and we can actually get the current value by getting it from the event, because once again, the event captures essentially just the UI element, but we can get the value from the event just like that. And we can go ahead and actually get the other element for our color, for our influence value. And we can get it by typing in items that we found up here. So type in items dot, put in the ID of the control, and then we can just set in text and set that equal to current value. And what we can do at the very start of this as well, take this code and put it at the very top of this so that when the UI launches, it will immediately get that text in it. So we don't actually want to have value set right there. We instead want to get it the same way that we're getting this right here. So we want to get items, tree colors, and then value of that slider. And that's going to be it right there. So it's going to be a between 0 and 100 scale for this. If you instead wanted to make this a 0 and 1, we can do it divided by 100, and that's going to make it between 0 and 1 instead. Okay, I actually missed this. We have to turn it into a string, and we're also going to divide it by 100 on both of them. So when we're adding it to our text, it needs to be converted into a string with just the operation toString. It's the same thing we did down here in the last video. We're going to go and add this to this spot right here, so it will have the up-to-date information as well. We're going to see it's actually going to update the number with the actual value between 0 and 1. Let's come on down here after our H group and add on another thing for color picker. This is going to allow us to let the user pick an actual color that DaVinci can read with like macros and other things like that, but with basic slider controls. Give it the ID of colors and give it the text of tree row color. And then we want to say do alpha is going to be set to false, so we're not going to be doing alpha. Set the tracking to true. I don't actually know what this is. We're just going to set it to true because it was on the list of things that we can add. And then we're also going to make the weight equal to 0. Now if we take a look, we can see we have our label right there, and we can turn on our colors just like that. We can actually see a little preview on the right to see what the color is going to look like on the UI. I actually do want to fix this. I'm going to set this just to have a 0.1 and set this maybe have a 0.9. Now as we scroll through this, we can see it has the full value actually visible. That's pretty good. That looks a lot more like how it does actually in the UI system over here. Pretty good. But okay, let's actually give this stuff some more functionality. We have these controls in here, but what are we actually going to do with them? Let's do some cool stuff. We're going to be going away from this selection method that we made in the last video, and we're actually going to make a color-based selection method that when you change the value over here, it changes the color of the selection up here. And as you change this influence right here, it changes the on and off value, the alpha basically of the actual color on the actual selection. And you're going to be using this to choose your selection. So let's get doing that. So first, let's go and start putting stuff in here whenever the slider actually moves. What we're going to do is we're going to check the color on our actual color controls, apply that to the background color of the tree item that is currently in the selection of our spin box, and then we're going to take that information and color the correct background, and based off of the intensity of the slider that the value is currently set to, is then going to adjust all of that. We're going to get the last item, set that equal to the current item, and we'll take a look at the current item here in a second. In fact, it's the next thing we're doing. If we then add in a current item, set that equal to, get it from the items, and we're going to get the example tree, and we're going to get the top level item, and we're going to do item test nums dot value. So what's happening here? We're going to look at the example tree just like how we're doing here to look at it right here to get the current item. We're going to look at the top level item at the index that this value is set to. Test nums is the spin box, and we're just getting the value just like how we're getting the value of the slider right here. We're just getting whatever number is in the spin box at the moment. And we're just going to look at that, whatever is the current item, we're just going to color it with our colors. So we're going to check if the last item exists and last item does not equal the current item, then let's go ahead and change the background. So we're going to go and do last item because that is the past current item. So we're basically saying if this current item is not equal to the previous item we had, we're going to instead then set the background color back to 0, and then we're going to right after this set the new current item's background to the new background. Let's take a look at that actually in the code. So we're going to set the background color here for row 1. We have to know how many rows there are, so row 1 is 0 here. We're going to set that equal to a table with the index of RGB, and we're also going to give an A value as well. So we're just going to set the R to 0, G to 0, and B to 0, along with the A is also going to be set to 0. And I'm just going to duplicate this 2 more times with Control D in VS Code, and I'm going to do the exact same thing for the other 2 rows. So then once again, like I said, we are just resetting the backgrounds for the previous item. And then right after this, we're going to do the similar thing for the current item. So we're going to do current item dot background color, and then once again for 0, and then we're going to set this equal to another table. This one's going to be a little bit different. We are going to set this equal to color value of the color picker for these different colors. So first off, let's go ahead and actually get those colors. So we need to get red, and it's going to be equal to items.colors.color, and then at the index of R. We can see it's set up in a very similar index to how these are set up. And then we can do that for green in blue, and then give this green and give this blue. And we're going to set this equal to R having red, green, having green, and B having blue. Super easy. And then we're also then going to take the current value and make that the alpha. So we're going to do alpha is equal to the math equation, same thing we just did for our slider right here, of the current value divided by 100, just like that. So this is just, since we need to take this n between 0 and 1, we're going to just divide it by 100 again, just like for our input, and make that between 0 and 1. And then we just need to duplicate this 2 more times for our other 2 rows, and then we should be good to go. Whenever we actually change our slider, it should change the intensity based off of what the slider value is currently at. When we first load into it, we're not going to see it has any background colors, but if we go ahead and set our let's set this color to something right here, and then change our color influence and go up and down, we're going to see it is actually changing our background color. If we take a look, we can see it needs to be on 1 and 2. I messed up my numbers there. Easy mistake. So let's take a look at that once again, and we'll see it's going to look just right. If we actually do this like this, it's going to have a nice black background. Now let's do that for whenever the color changes in the actual color picker. This is basically going to be a lot of copy and pasting of code. So let's go and take a look at this really quickly. I'm going to copy this function right here, and whenever it changes, it's going to change the value of our backgrounds again. So what we're doing here is we are getting the current value again, just like how we did up here. But this time we have to get it from the current value of the slider by actually looking at the items instead of looking at the event. And then we can set the current item equal to last item again, get the new current item, replace the last background color with the new color of just nothing, and then put in that new color. In the actual demo, I didn't separate them all out into separate things like this. Well, I can go ahead and correct this really quickly, just like this. This is just maybe a little faster, but I don't really know. We're only getting the information one time, as opposed to the 3 individual times for each one, so maybe a little bit faster. So now we want to make a function that's going to check and change the background color of our tree whenever we change the input number of our spin box, so that the item number of how many items are in the tree updates to whichever item's actually in the tree. So I'm going to copy this function out once again, put it on in here, and once again replace the bottom section of this so that it matches our new standard. Once again, we can see everything up here is the exact same, even down here is the exact same. The only thing that's really changing is just whatever is happening to cause it to change. And then there's one more thing that I want to do. I want to set the color of the very first selected background to our first color right as we launch into the script. If we currently take a look at the script and run it in DaVinci Resolve, we're going to see it will only ever change when you change a slider, but it won't change whenever it's currently loaded. We can see everything is working. The color is updating correctly. Right over here, right after we have our link activation, I'm going to paste in a bunch of code, and it's going to look very, very similar to what we've already been looking at. Right here, we're going to paste it in. We are going to just create the 2 variables for current item and last item. We're going to get a current value, and once again, just get whatever values in that slider. Get the last item. And this is pretty much just going to be, for the first one, there's not going to be a last item. So if there's a last item, then they're going to do this check. But since there's no last item here, we're just going to continue on to do this next stuff. But we get the new current item. We get that set down here. Once again, copy our new stuff to replace the old stuff. And then we're also going to just get rid of current value because it doesn't need to exist outside of this section right here. The middle number is selected with the background, and whenever we change the input, it'll change the background color, and whenever we change the color influence, it'll change how much it's actually affecting the background color, and then this is just going to change the color of the background. Super awesome, honestly really easy to set up. But there's one more thing I actually want to do. I want to use that current item to jump to the correct time code of whatever it was that selected that way. So what I have to do for that is just comment these 2 lines out, and that's going to use the old current item instead of this new current item It's really easy, just like that. It's going to now use whatever is currently selected in our tree. Whenever we have our selection at, it's going to go to that selected clip in that selection right there. Pretty cool. Not a lot of extra work, but there's some new cool things I wanted to show off for the UI system. I thought they were really cool. There's actually going to be more stuff in the file that I'm going to send to you guys. There's a whole timeout system for the UI system, along with a other bunch of stuff that we're going to get to in other videos. In the newest updates to DaVinci Resolve, they have recently made it to where the free version of DaVinci does not allow for the UI system. And this is for DaVinci Resolve 19.1 if you're not currently up to date. 19.1 has currently introduced a block for anybody using the free version of DaVinci Resolve to use any script that uses the UI system that we've just been teaching about in these videos. If you're using the free version of Resolve, you cannot learn this UI system until you buy a Studio, and you cannot use a script that is usually free that can be used on free Resolve that uses the UI system. So it's really unfortunate, and I really hope that they do reverse all this, but until then, this is how we have it. This is what we're stuck with. And also, definitely stay on the lookout for my 1,000 subscribers special. Really cool stuff coming out for that. Cannot wait till that is done and ready for you guys. I just want to make sure that it's nice and polished and make sure that's actually interesting enough to hand to you. Once again, it's not really a tool, but it is a script. But it does use the UI system, so if you're in the free version of Resolve, unfortunately, you won't be able to use this. It's unfortunately just a thing that DaVinci has introduced that I don't really have control over. But if you would rather do this, you can also just stay on the previous versions of Resolve. That is going to be it for today. Go and check out this video over here to learn about the beginning stuff about scripting. I have some good stuff in here talking about APIs, variables, and functions. This was the last video I just did. But also check out this video over here to learn more about the stuff for actual Fusion UI scripting. I got some good stuff starting off with this video. But also check out all the links I have down below talking about everything I've done for my tools, the scripting and macro videos, and lots of cool new stuff coming out soon. But yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Happy animating.